Observe a common relationship dynamic where one partner systematically extracts precious time and emotional energy from the other. Relationship control often operates through a highly calculated performance of helplessness rather than overt aggression. Psychologists identify this behavior as strategic incompetence, widely referred to as weaponized incompetence. It operates by feigning an inability to complete basic everyday tasks. The individual employs calculated mistakes and exaggerated confusion to demonstrate that they are incapable of meeting simple responsibilities. This is a distinct behavior from genuine mistakes, or the standard learning curve required to master a new skill. By performing a clinical autopsy of this dynamic, we can observe exactly how it functions as a parasitic extraction of labor from the host partner. This strategic display of confusion secures a permanent caregiving role, shifting the entire weight of the relationship onto the partner. The unequal division of physical and cognitive labor in domestic partnerships has an documented historical baseline. Societal expectations historically enforced these divisions overtly. A partner could explicitly refuse domestic labor because the cultural architecture supported that refusal. As modern relationships shifted toward equal partnership, an overt refusal to contribute became socially unacceptable. Strategic incompetence evolved as a covert workaround. It allows an individual to maintain the historical imbalance without appearing overtly controlling or uncooperative. By weaponizing incompetence, an individual extracts the same volume of labor from their partner while maintaining the plausible deniability of being clumsy or forgetful. To understand how this manipulation works, we must look at psychologist Martin Seligman's 1967 research on learned helplessness. Seligman identified learned helplessness as a neurobiological default state. When a subject faces prolonged, genuinely uncontrollable adverse events within their environment, the brain triggers a state of absolute passivity. Manipulators actively simulate this state. They construct a scenario where they appear paralyzed by a task to trigger a rescue response. We must clinically separate this strategic behavior from genuine neurodivergence, such as ADHD or executive dysfunction. This matrix maps task consistency against environment. ADHD is neurologically wired. These individuals struggle persistently across all environments, even when beneficial. In contrast, the strategic manipulator's competence fluctuates based on self-interest. They fail at shared domestic tasks, yet demonstrate high executive function in personal hobbies. True helplessness is a paralysis caused by a lack of control. Simulated helplessness is a calculated strategy used to establish control over a system. This behavior relies on a behavioral feedback loop that clinical psychology labels complementary functioning. Here, the underfunctioner adopts a weak persona. They refuse initiative, act confused, and constantly seek advice. This forces the counterpart into the role of overfunctioner. They absorb the burden, overcorrect intentional mistakes, and feel entirely responsible for the system's survival. The trap of the feedback loop lies in the overfunctioner's perception. They believe fixing a botched task is an act of love or efficiency. The underfunctioner relies on this. They utilize minor delays and poor execution to trigger the overfunctioner's anxiety. The moment the overfunctioner intervenes, the underfunctioner's avoidance strategy is validated. Every time the overfunctioner attempts to rescue the underfunctioner from failure, they inadvertently reinforce and deepen the parasitic dependency. The extraction of labor extends deep into the host's psychological well-being. This clinical state is known as mental load. It is the invisible, boundaryless cognitive labor required to manage a household or a relationship. Mental load consists of anticipating needs, identifying potential problems, making executive decisions, and delegating responsibilities. By demanding exact instructions for basic tasks, the underfunctioner forces the host into a permanent project manager role. Over months and years, this heavy cognitive burden relentlessly compounds. This relentless processing leads directly to the overfunctioner's burnout, deep resentment, and chronic exhaustion. The ultimate victory for the parasite is successfully outsourcing the entire cognitive architecture of the relationship onto the host. In its end stage, this parasitic dynamic leaves a relationship entirely drained of empathy, trust, and intimacy. If the system is this destructive, why does the overfunctioner continue to carry the weight? The overfunctioner is trapped by their own internalized fears. They carry a fear of failure, an anxiety about external judgment, and deep guilt over letting standards slip. The underfunctioner relies on those high standards. They know that if they stall long enough, the host's anxiety will guarantee the task is completed. Weaponized incompetence relies entirely on the host's ongoing willingness to absorb the consequences of failure. Disrupting this complementary functioning loop requires a direct clinical intervention. The host must completely cease all fixing, rescuing, and overfunctioning behaviors, regardless of the short-term chaos it causes in the household. This introduces the principle of natural consequences. If the underfunctioner botches a task or misses a deadline, they alone must face the fallout. The overfunctioner will experience extreme discomfort watching the system temporarily fail. Tolerating that discomfort is the absolute prerequisite for change. Equilibrium returns only when the